Welcome to Two Baptists and That Amish Chick, a podcast brought to you by the Butter Churn Girls. I'm Leslie.
And I'm Bethany.
And I'm Berlin. Join us for candid conversations about organized religion, the good, the bad, the ugly, and how we broke free from it while holding on to our faith in God.
In these candid conversations, you can expect to laugh, to relate, occasionally cry, and definitely hear a few cuss words.
Be sure to subscribe to the podcast on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform and follow at the Butter Churn Girls on all socials. Now for this week's episode.
Hey, welcome back to the podcast. Have you watched the Shiny Happy People movie? Well, it's not a movie, it's a show on Amazon Prime. Did I have that right, guys?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Have you guys watched that? Because we're here to talk about it. And we all sat down last night and watched all of the first episodes that
binged it.
Yes, we did. And there were many moments in watching it where we were like, oh my gosh, we had to stop it.
It took us forever because we kept
Yes.
pausing it going, did you hear that?
And like some of us got triggered. We're like, oh my word, I remember similar things happening in like, you know, the cult I grew up in and you guys growing up Baptist. I don't know. Can I say Baptist is a cult?
I call it a cult.
I mean, I think there's a lot of, I think, and this is actually a conversation I actually wanted to have, or like at some point mention. So thanks for segueing this.
Yeah.
No, I do think there's a lot of denominations that have cults within them, or there are cults that are operating under certain labels like Baptist. You can go any denomination here, right? Catholic, Methodist, Lutheran, Methodist, I don't know. Like they're pretty chill.
Yeah.
Like there's not a whole lot of controversy there in my opinion, but like, you know, it doesn't matter what denomination, even the non-denom churches, like you can find cult-like behavior in that too. So I think there are aspects that are definitely cult-like. And even for the longest time, like knowing this documentary is about the Duggars, I thought the Duggars were Baptist because there were images of them getting married at a Baptist church and different things like that. And so I always thought they were Baptist and I was like, whoa, my Baptist was never like that.
Yeah.
Quite like that, right? Like there's definitely some similarities, but
they were not raised Baptist though.
No. And so, and that was the whole point of the documentary. But I do think calling like the Baptists a cult, like I think there's cult-like stuff within the Baptist denomination, but I think labeling it as a whole, like I never want anyone to assume that we're just calling all denominations as a whole cults. Like that's one of the things that I wanted to definitely clarify because we understand what we mean, but sometimes like as a listener, you need to, you're like, I don't know them yet. Like what exactly are these things?
Yeah,
so I did want to actually mention that at some point. So there you go.
Yeah.
I actually just pulled up like some definitions of cult, which I think cult, like looking at the definitions, it's not really set in stone of like, here's how you know what a cult is. And I think anytime, because whenever you're talking about beliefs, we could sit there and have a conversation and say we believe the same thing. But if I'm overextending my belief in that and the way I live it out and the way I treat people because of it, it could be cult-like behavior when for you it's not, sort of thing. And so I brought up some definitions of it, and some of them are really poor definitions that really have no meaning in a way. But others of them I think are ones that are really, really great. So this one says a small religious group that is not part of a larger or more accepted religion and that has beliefs regarded by many people as extreme or dangerous. Another one says the term cult refers most often to a group of people with usually atypical beliefs living a relative isolation from the world. I like those two parts where it talks about the extreme or dangerous and the isolation from the world, because I think those are the big things when you're trying to separate yourself and stuff and be completely away from everyone else. That's what a cult leader does, is to create that separation, because then that's when they have control. Just look at abusers. Abusers aren't abusing someone that's abusing children. It's not doing it out in a public place. They're taking them away to somewhere private where they can be abused,
where they can manipulate and control that person and like get them away. Because if they're around other people, they're gonna realize, oh, this isn't normal, right? So the only way, like you said, to get somebody to do something that's not normal, that's dangerous or hurtful or harmful in any way, is to separate them and isolate. I think separation and isolation is one of the biggest what's the word I'm looking for? Factors that you can be like, oh, that's a cult. Like if that's happening, it's probably cult-like. Might not be all, well, honestly, So if you remove everybody from remove those people from everybody else, you have a cult as a result. Like that's might be one of the biggest red flags and one of the biggest things that like you are in a cult. Because that's what the Amish are, honestly. Like they don't want to be part of the world. They don't like, we're not going to be a part of society because it's all wicked. And
you're not even wanting to influence society.
No, it's like
you're like, they're damned.
Mm-hmm.
I'm out. Like too bad for them.
Yeah. But IBLP wasn't like that.
No, like they wanted, I felt like they were on a recruiting mission.
They talked about it.
Yeah.
And so like, I really do feel like, and they did it all in the guise of like bringing people to the kingdom, bringing people to God and the way things should be. But what they were doing was recruiting for their agenda. And so when it's man's agenda, like I was going to say versus God's agenda, but God didn't have an agenda.
No.
Right? Like
God
doesn't
relationship. That's all
an
he wants.
agenda.
His agenda is relationship. I want to know you. I want to be your friend. That's literally it.
Yeah.
I want to spend time with you.
And so what I think is interesting, and you hit on this a little bit, is pulling these people away to control the people, because you can't control the environment when they're out there. You have to bring them in so you can control the environment, control what they're seeing and hearing and being influenced by. And when something is so surrounded, like when you're so surrounded by a certain narrative, it's easier to convince them and like say, hey, this is the way it should be. This is what it should look like. This is,
Right.
ideal.
What was that thing you said earlier about what you said just made me think of what you said. Really. There's a lot of you said in here.
The listeners are like, who are you pointing to?
Yeah. So what Leslie said brought up something that I remember Berlin saying earlier today about we were in the kitchen and you were saying we're talking about the shiny happy people, all the things, and you said what was it? Oh my gosh.
I'm like, I don't remember what I said.
It was right there on the tip of my tongue. I don't know. We'll come back to it.
Was it when I was talking to my husband about it?
No. It was something else. Hopefully it comes back.
Okay.
It was important and good.
Bring it back.
Yeah, that's right. Holy Spirit, activate. Anyway, do you want to get into some of the bullet points we made as we were watching it?
Yeah.
And like,
let's jump in.
Okay.
So if you don't know, it's really talking about IBLP, and it's really talking about IBLP's poster child, which was essentially the Duggar family.
Yeah.
And so you even hear from Jill Duggar, you hear from a bunch of other people, you hear from the Duggars' cousin Amy. Freaking love cousin Amy and her husband. We were just talking about that. We're like, we think he almost like stole the show.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
He's amazing. Like I loved his take because he came from a completely outside view, and he's like
This
getting
shit's
a
crazy,
very in-depth, like he gets a whole different view than anybody else, right? Like we've been watching it from the outside for years. Because I know like Berlin and I were talking about watching the show growing up and like and I remember like nannying babies, like rocking babies to nap, and I literally just had the Duggars on. Whatever show it was, whether it was Counting On or anyway. But really it was talking about the Duggars and their family secrets and how it's not just the Duggars that have these things.
because a lot of other people who used to be IBLP were in the show talking about their similar
so it's not
traits.
just about the Duggars. It is about IBLP.
Yeah.
But the Duggars are so well known, and their story and everything, like even with all of the Josh stuff, which we'll get into, all of it is so well known and in the public eye. It was kind of like the overarching view, but they're like, hey, no, just like the Duggars, this is what happened to me. And so it's really fascinating to hear different takes. And I loved some of those people. I'm like, I want to sit down and have a conversation with them because their stories were so fascinating. And there's people that I'm like, y'all would be perfect. So, hey, if you want to like hop on a podcast,
right? If you listen to this and you want a place
we
where
want to talk to you.
yes, which I'm sure those people get a lot of people who want to talk to them. And, like, I don't know if you get tired of that. I would get tired of like rehashing it all, because Bill Gothard was he was the man that everybody went to. And I think that's another sign of a cult, just really quick. I want to make that point. It's like, you're in a cult when there is one man who tells everybody else, one or like a few who tell everybody else how to live, and you cannot have a relationship with God outside of first having a relationship with those people. And it's like, you, and then, those people, and then God in your life. Like, that's a big red flag of that's a cult. Because it's usually one person, one man. There's never, I don't think there's ever been a cult started by a woman, honestly. Like, it's usually,
I think there's
one,
is there? Okay.
The Family in Australia. The one in Australia.
I haven't seen that one on the
Okay.
Family. There's another one called The Family. But there is a cult that started by a woman.
So I was wrong. But
it's generally
men.
Yes.
Obviously a few women in there too. But that's a big sign if you have one person at the top who's like, or a few, in my case, it was a few people who tell everybody else how to live, how to think. Like, you can't do anything without those people's approval. That's a dictator, probably a narcissist.
Oh, for sure.
Power.
I don't think you can have a cult and it not be led by a narcissist.
Exactly.
That's Leslie's opinion. That's not anything else. But
I think it's true. Like, there's narcissistic tendencies in a cult anyway. And where do they come from? They come from the top. So anyway.
That's very true.
Yeah.
That's so true. Okay, so let's dive into some of these things. So we just have a bunch of notes from when we were watching. A lot of it's intertwined. So we may jump from one topic and then come back to it because there's a lot there. So one thing that was said in the very beginning, like I feel like the first 5 minutes,
it was literally like what they started it with.
Is we all know the stuff about Josh Duggar and him being arrested for child pornography, insane amounts of it, and very young children.
And I do feel like this quote, that it's a quote from Jim Bob, but I do think this quote was due to his cheating before the child pornography stuff even came up. I think this quote was from back even further.
Oh, was it? Okay.
When it was just the affairs that were found out about before everything imploded. And I say, like, that sounds weird that I'm like, oh, just the affairs, but we all know Josh's story. How much came out.
Yeah.
So like, that's what I'm referring to, was this was a quote from
before all the other stuff came out. Yeah.
So it says, God is using our situation with Josh to purify our family. And I hate this. I have heard my mother say this. I have heard people in church say this. I have heard like that God uses hard situations to purify and refine us, and it is disgusting and gross.
Yeah.
Now, like, God uses every situation, like God works every situation for good. But to be like, God's using this for this, definitely puts the voice behind it of God brought this here, right?
God said, hey, Josh, here's this because the rest of your family needs purified.
Yeah. And it also says, I couldn't purify you. I couldn't make
Jesus
you better.
Wasn't enough.
Yeah. I couldn't make you better without having these hard situations. So because they're here, and they highlight that inside there where it's like, there is one phrase, I'm just going to jump to it because it goes together, where a girl actually said, because of that concept, I'm trying to scroll through my notes here and see, but basically she said that she had friends that had been raped, and she actually was a little bit jealous of them because basically the IBLP says that if you've gone through something hard, then that means you get to be closer to God because of it. So she was jealous of the hard things that these other girls had been through.
Because God could use them more.
Yeah. Because she was like, well, God can use them more. So I'm, obviously he can't use me as much as he can use them. And I just want the pure, but the thing, okay, so the crazy thing in all of this, before I make a comment on that, like, this is good for you guys to know, the listener, is I think all three of us had moments when we were watching the documentary where we were like, we used to believe some of these, like, sometimes you don't realize how healthy you've become, how free you've become, how much you've grown until you
you're confronted with your former beliefs.
Yeah. And you're like, holy shit, I used to believe that. Like, how did I, like, red flag. Like, how did I not see this? Wild.
That feels bizarre to look at it. And you're like,
yeah,
holy crap. Like,
I used to believe that. Like,
even some of the songs they were singing in there, I was like,
yes.
Oh my gosh, I remember that song. We used to sing that song. That's what that says.
We heard the lyrics again from this completely different mindset. And we were like, whoa, that's not God.
No.
Right.
Not at all.
And did you notice some of the hymns that they were even singing? Like, and this is a side note, wasn't even mentioned, but like some of the hymns they were singing were all about like them. It wasn't about God and how great God was. And like, it was literally like they were singing a hymn talking about burning for eternity. And I was like,
yeah,
whoa. First
I see God rolling his eyes going, oh my gosh, this is gross.
Oh, here we go again.
Well, not wrong. Like if I was God, I would be like, are you guys kidding me right now? Like but they weren't singing about themselves as like we're made in God's image and like glorifying how they were made through the creator. It was like how awful we are and how sinful we are. Again, that whole like religion will point out how dirty you are, which you aren't even, but like it wants to keep
It's
you
the false repentance.
Yeah, it's like
the groveling
under that cover.
Continual groveling.
Yeah, it's just dumb.
I will say that even in the midst of watching that, my husband watched it with us. And so last night before bed, I was like, I realize I've still got more things to heal. Like when we start talking about the relationship and marriage things and the things about who you are as a woman and your worth, I was like, oh, dang, I still have some things I've got to unpack.
Yeah.
I've still got some things to work on. So it was sometimes it's good to look back at those places where, now obviously we didn't come from those exact places, but there are things that are very similar in teachings that I absolutely learned from there that, I'm like, there's still things to heal. There's still things to work through.
Yeah.
Constantly getting better.
Yeah. And, every time trauma happens to you, religious trauma, it doesn't matter what kind of trauma it is, a part of you breaks off. And so the same thing can happen to you over and over and over and over and over again over a span of 20 some years or 15 years or whatever. And every time that thing happens to you again, a new part of you has to take that responsibility of dealing with that. And so, you might think that you're like, I'm done with this. I've, healed from this there, but there might be one or two parts who are like, no, but like we experienced it and we're still stuck in that. Right. And so it was good for me even to, because I was like, oh, dang, I think there's probably some things in me that are like.
Well, and I think sometimes you don't realize it's there because the most active parts that come up have been worked through and processed through.
Right.
But until you're confronted with a situation, something said, we watched something this extreme, we're like, oh, there's this piece that I consciously didn't know to go back and work on. And yes, subconsciously we've worked on some, right? When you work on the rest, you're going to hit that a little bit, but this specifically, like it's almost habit. So until it's brought up again and really confronted, you're not working through it fully. Right.
And some of those things are core too, like core things that happen. So they're deep. They're not on the surface. They're like all the way down on like they're hiding for a reason and because they don't feel safe. And so, anyway, the other thing that I find so interesting is the word abuse doesn't exist in that community, the IBLP community.
Like that's they don't use red that flag on its own too, right? Like what a red flag if you can't use the word abuse. And then there was even a line later on, they were talking about how like you couldn't even gossip and say you couldn't. What's the word I'm looking for?
They made a rule about that you couldn't gossip. And basically they made that rule.
You could make allegations.
So you couldn't, so that people couldn't make allegations against abuse, especially specifically when women started coming out and saying Bill Gothard,
and he used
touched me inappropriately.
He used Matthew 18 as the scriptural context for making that rule. Like that was what you said, and that's exactly what you said in the kitchen earlier about people using God.
Yes,
that's and they use scripture that way too. Do you want to say?
Yeah, so I was talking to my husband about it. I was like, they talk about blanket training in there, which they said I was mind blown. At 6 months old, they put a baby on a blanket, put a toy off the blanket, and then when the baby
the baby wants,
what do you mean?
Sometimes they even send the babies once they're a little older, go pick your toy for blanket time or blanket training,
and said we're going to learn how to obey mama is what Michelle Duggar said. And they put the baby in the blanket, put the toy off the blanket, and when the baby reaches for the toy off from the blanket, they hit the baby.
Smack the hand.
And do the baby until the baby basically quits trying or quits responding. And I no, you're okay. And I was like, if someone came out with a book that talked about that now, and it didn't talk about God at all and have a reason behind it that had to do with faith, people be like, you are fucking crazy to think that that is a thing to do to a 6-month-old baby.
You are an abuser and you need to go to jail.
But when people put God behind it, all of a sudden,
or
people are like, there must be a reason that it's here.
Yeah.
God must want it. Because when you have this jacked up view of God, that God is this angry judgment, awful God that you have to be punished and that you have to be corrected all the time. Not that he's actually made you new and righteous. We're just going to pretend like Jesus didn't die on the cross for our sins and completely wipe everything away. Then that's what you're stuck with. And so it's going to put you into this place where people believe that crap.
Yeah.
Whereas if it didn't have it, if someone wrote a book where it had or taught those methods, it had nothing to do with faith, people be like, you are freaking crazy.
Yes. that whole blanket training a child as a baby. With that, one of the women on there who like they did clips of like trainings that were done by IBLP, and so it was like screen or snapshots of those, right? And one of those was a woman talking about the baby was not even a year old.
It was 14 months.
Sorry,
just over.
So just a little over a year. And he's like, I cannot get this. And
I
all of the women,
that baby all day long is what she said.
She's like, and that baby kept trying to, and that baby kept shaming me.
Yeah.
What does that even?
What the fuck? The baby is a baby. And it's like, they literally had this thing that you have to break the will of a child because they were born to rebel and to disobey all the time. That's what blanket training did. That's what the spanking did. All those things was to like, and it was sick to watch, but it was almost like the adults got enjoyment out of breaking a child's will. And you wonder
because their will was broken at some point.
Yes.
So they're like, oh, I'm in control now. Like it gave them almost like a little bit of a power entitlement, you know?
Yeah, because finally they can make decisions.
That's what happens in both religion and cults.
Yes.
Is when someone needs to have the power over someone else.
Yes. Do you want to tell them what Amy said when she said that, but was talking about them, Amy is the cousin, but
the Duggar's cousin.
Duggar's cousin, when she talked about them, you know, breaking a child, quote unquote, breaking a child's will. She's like, what did she say? I didn't see a broken wills. She was like all the I can't talk. All of the kids, when she saw them, she was like, they're so well behaved, and everybody kept commenting on they're so chill and so calm and so meek. Like they're just like these poster children who are so nice. And she's like, I didn't see that. I saw spirits who were crushed. Because you have to crush somebody's spirit and like shatter who they are so that they get to a point where they will just be a docile puppy who will be quiet, who will do whatever you tell them to. That's not raising kids. That is breaking people and turning them into slaves.
That's making robots.
Yes.
Like you're literally
Creating
programming
robots.
them.
Yeah.
You're programming them.
And when Amy said that, I was like, I couldn't have said that better myself. Like, that's exactly what's happening. And then listen, so many of this stuff, I'm like, the Amish and the IBLP are literally the same thing because that's what they do with their kids too.
I saw them in the Baptist too.
It's
different levels, different things that are focused on, but it's the same thing happens.
And there was actually a guy on there talking about how his mom took him into the bathroom and beat him for an hour because his will wouldn't at church because his will wouldn't bend or something like that.
Yeah.
And somebody else come in and made a comment, and she's like, well, his will's not breaking. And so she just kept beating him in the bathroom. Like,
this was one of the guys who testified, and he's like, I still remember that. I'm like, yeah, you do. That was a horrific,
I mean, and he even made
event.
the comment, like, he's like, I've burned every bridge with my family just by being here. So let's go. Like, these people are so tired of it. And first off, like, I want to commend everybody that was on that documentary. And I love that they're like, their ages are pretty, I mean, I still think like Jill was probably one of the youngest ones on there, but like
there was a range of ages.
There was a decent range of ages, but like they all had the same experience, and they're all of this. I think we're all just as a whole, I think due to social media, a lot of stuff's getting out there, and we're getting a realization, like when you're out of your bubble, just how free other things can be and just how twisted what you're in is, but it's really amazing to see all of them coming together going, whoa, this isn't right. Like even just realizing the small, and they even talked about deconstruction in there a little bit too, which I thought I was like, I figured it was coming at some point.
And they talked about the definition of deconstruction, or their definition, which I thought was beautiful.
Go ahead.
You remember that?
No.
So they said that the deconstruction is looking at everything that you were taught to believe and realizing that those things might not be true, and might not be what you actually believe anymore. And so, a lot of deconstruction can sound like, especially to people who are like Christians or, are still in
the church
or religion or whatever, they can be like, oh my gosh, they're going to hell, they're throwing everything out. No, it is people starting to wake up, think for themselves, realize that they've been programmed and conditioned to think a certain way, and they're people like they are detoxing from being robots and slaves, and discovering that, no, you know what, not one person gets to tell me what to think and how to think. That is my own. It's people taking back the like their own sovereignty, honestly, like the sovereignty of who they are. And like, God made you that way. He didn't make us to rule over each other. He made us to rule over territory. Territory is not people. It's places and things and like atmospheres and land. It is not people.
Right.
People, all of us were made to have dominion, co-dominion over Earth and planets. I say planets who aren't even Earth. Like, I think that's why Elon is like spearheading that, right? And we've got to stop demonizing that, because all planets experience the fall, and so all planets are being restored. What if there's life form on other planets? What if there's other people on other planets, and we're just being small-minded here because we don't think that God's actually that big or we're that powerful? We're literally just dumbing ourselves down. I know I'm going on a rant here, but it ties into this. Like, deconstruction is not what a lot of people think, because they're scared shitless of something they don't understand, and so they judge it.
If me changing my mind threatens your beliefs are shit anyway.
That's 100%.
Yes.
And if
So
you're
there's
threatened
that.
by it and get angry about it,
Yes.
We're talking to the people in our comments.
Yes.
Just saying.
that's so good.
No, but I want to mention this because we were talking about like we're not supposed to have dominion over people. And there was a woman on there, and she was talking about basically when a man chooses you, you have no choice in IBLP. When a man goes, I want to marry her, like I want to court her, whatever. She really doesn't have a whole lot of say. They say she does, but she doesn't.
Because that's the man.
Because the dads and the son are the ones that decide for her.
Do you want to use the phrase that they use?
Which one?
They're like, God, this is the man God picked out for you.
Oh yes. They of course they put it on God. They blame all of their stuff on God. And I think that's another, like, none of them decided. God chose it. But did he?
No.
But anyway, this woman was on there and she was talking and she said, I didn't feel safe, but I spent my life praying for the man I'd marry. So I just bent my will. She was like, I don't feel safe in this situation. I don't feel safe, but I'm just going to bend my will anyway. Like, because I've been praying for this. And this is what, and another big thing, which will, like, this is probably going to go a couple different ways, but, women cannot have authority over themselves. So you're under the authority of your father, and then you're under the authority of your husband. And there's no in between.
That's
like,
why
you
he
never
gives
get
you away
say over yourself. That's why your dad gives you away, whatever.
Well, it's that covering concept. And I made a note in here as we're watching it, because when I came into like the stream of faith that I'm in now, everyone kept saying the covering, and I didn't even know what it meant. And then I heard someone say, when they talk about the umbrellas and stuff, and I went, oh my gosh, I learned that. And the umbrella analogy was all throughout this documentary. I mean, they showed the images of it where there's a giant umbrella that has God, and then a little bit smaller umbrella that has
a
husband, right? And then the wife, and then the
children.
kids are underneath.
They forgot the Bill Gothard umbrella in there somewhere, because that's one too.
Yeah, that's kind of one that they have too.
Oh yeah, that's
he's the cloud.
Yeah,
basically.
The ominous cloud.
And so, like, if you're looking at that umbrella concept, God can never even reach you. Like, God can't reach your kids because you've got this big old umbrella over you and multiple layers of it. And so if you are saying that there's this covering or this in between, you can't even expect your kids to get to know God. And that's why a lot of them don't know God. They don't know the heart of the father.
They know a system.
They don't know the heart of their father because their father doesn't know the heart of their father.
Exactly.
And when you have to go through all those channels, they're never going to get to the heart of the father. Mom doesn't know.
Exhausting.
Yes.
Well, and the umbrella of Christ or God is really not an umbrella. It's a control mechanism that they label God or Christ so that they can tell you that, oh, God said this. They can literally use that label to pass anything that they want into, like, this is the truth. This is what God says. They're literally not boycotting. What's the word when you like take on somebody else's persona or something so that you can do things for their name? Hijacking. Yeah, it's like hijacking God. Anyway.
So like this umbrella concept also like plays into the abuse piece that we were just talking about, because this next part, we paused this for a while at this point.
Is that when I got up and ran around the house?
I'm pretty sure. Like we even had to like rewind and watch it again because we were like, did we really just hear and see this? There is a domestic discipline contract that you sign where you agree to be disciplined by your husband. I'm shaking right now just reading this. It makes me so mad. And if you don't say like, yes, sir, or my lord, oh my, puke in my mouth. That's so gross. If you don't say that to your husband, there are consequences. And spanking by husbands includes children, older daughters, and wives. There is even a place in this documentary where they talked about corner time. If you're allowed, the big word being if you are allowed to cry during discipline, like domestic discipline, it's in the contract. Your husband gets to decide you can cry this time, you can't cry, you're going to spend time in the corner, you're going to get like whatever your consequence is. And if you're supposed to have sex with him afterwards to reconnect. There's so much.
If God wasn't put in, if they took God out of this, do you know what this would sound like? An abuser that the FBI and people go after to take out because they are a threat to humanity. And it even talks about it where it says Bill Gothard is literally the power. What did it say? The playbook of a powerful narcissist. Like it is incredible the things people will just look over because it's in the name of God.
This is where I think, honestly, like it's great that we have the separation of church and state, but also sometimes it's not great that we have the separation of church and state.
Exactly.
Because anyone can make these kind of rules wouldn't be allowed in a school.
And they can put it under like
in a business. You don't go to your job and have your boss be like, you didn't do your work, I'm going to spank you and make you sit in the corner. And like, that's not a thing. So why is that? Your teacher can't do that to your kids. So why do you, it's insane to me. It's absolutely insane to me.
Yeah, I think that separation was good for when it happened because state was trying to make people believe a certain thing. I think when the state does its job correctly, which is protect and serve the people, like just protect and serve, don't get into their business, don't get into what they believe, right? But if what they're doing is causing harm to other people, it needs to stop, right? I guess that would kind of be getting into their faith. I don't know. See, that's such a tricky thing, though. Like, there's so many things that like you have to consider.
Well, it was flip-flopped then, basically, right?
Right.
This state, the country, whatever, was actually like, here's the faith that you need to believe. When now it's gotten to where it's like, because
the whole reason the King James Bible is what it is, right? Like that's really where there was no separation.
Yeah.
This is what you need to believe, and that's how
when the state actually rewrote the Bible.
Yeah.
And so now we're in this place where it's like we've separated church and state so much where it's now the state can't go in and have a say. It's very rare. It's very hard. I mean, like this is not the only cult documentary I've watched. I've seen pretty much all of them. And I watch even things like the FLDS and stuff. The fact that you can go in there and they have video recordings of 14-year-old girls being raped with a crowd watching, right? And the government's still like, we can't really do anything because this is in
religious
church.
beliefs.
Yeah,
it's religious freedom in the name of religious freedom.
And so, so gross. It's so nasty, and it's just disgusting. Like I can't imagine. I just imagine God like looking down, and being like, "Oh, this isn't me." Like I hate that people think this is me, and that people are going to watch this. There will be people that watch this that go, "Oh, this is what all of Christianity is like, and this is what God is like, and this is what all God followers are like." And it'll completely push people away. And I hate that. And you know that, I mean, I think there's also going to be more people that watch it. I think there'll be a larger portion of people that watch it that kind of do what we did, where they went, oh shit, I was raised with pieces of that. Or, oh, I didn't realize I was raised in that. Leslie had a point in there where she was like, I think I did that curriculum in my school.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even part of school. It was not like it wasn't part of school, but I can't remember if it was part of like between 4-H and after school program, something like
Yeah, extracurricular
It was a
thing.
character first. And I went and I looked at it and I'm like, from the outside, it's not bad. And I don't remember learning anything too crazy from it. Like the name just like rang a bell and I went, whoa, hold on.
Right.
Well, here's the thing too, is there are good things in some of these things. Not everything they're teaching is completely wrong.
Right.
Right. But it's whenever
It's the
strength,
way
strength
it's being
when
taught.
strength is overextended, right? Like when we talk about purity culture, we're not saying go sleep with everyone.
Right.
I think it's great.
I think everyone sees it as an extreme. We're like, calm down.
I'm like, my husband and I waited to have sex until we were married. Barely. But we waited.
Did you say apparently or barely?
Almost pushed that wedding forward a week somehow and just eloped, but like, screw this. But at the same time, we're not saying, there's those things that are good, but I also think when, we look at people like Josh and stuff, when they're thinking that seeing someone's calves is going to be over sexualizing, then it's going to create this really jacked up mindset.
Well, and that's even part of their school curriculum. Them going, like, they went over some of the school curriculum from IBLP's homeschool program. It's ATI, I think was what it was called. Advanced Training Institute. There you go. Yeah. And their wisdom booklets is what they were called. And it literally had, which one of these is the immodest dress? So they're teaching these kids how to spot the over-sexualized things in general. They're teaching them not just only to spot it, but to over-sexualize things. Like it was somebody with like lace on the top of their shirt and they're like, oh, and then there was a skirt that was like right at the knees. And like you go in and you circle in these workbooks, like what is the immodest dress? And like
they said, instead of learning math, we were learning slut shaming.
That was brilliant. I love that. I loved that.
And that was another thing that they said with one of the math. When I heard that, I wanted to vomit. It said, what did it say?
It said she never learned math outside of fractions. And her dad said that was good enough because that's all you need for baking.
He told his daughter that. And we
all went, well, yeah, that's kind of where we figured out fractions too, but that wasn't all we learned.
Yeah.
But then like there's they talk about this single mother who like had to separate from because of the abuse. She doesn't know how to do anything because of that very thing. She was only taught how to be a submissive wife who has as many kids as she can until her body is physically gives out, or there's
which is what Michelle Duggar did because her last baby. It was until her last baby passed, and then they were like, I don't know if my body can do this anymore.
Yeah, like
they were even like that before she got pregnant.
Yeah. Right. They were taught that. And so now these women and these people are so severely handicapped because they can't do anything because they don't know how to. They don't know how, like they even talked about how Josh's wife, Anna,
I was gonna say this is like Anna is such a good example.
Broke my heart because they're like, she could have a book deal like that,
but she has
no concept. She's living with Jim Bob and Michelle. And
with her 7 kids while Josh is in prison.
And no one will tell her anything. And Jim Bob signs for all the kids on contract, which it gets into and like they're grown kids. He was making money off the grown kids and not paying them a single cent. They were grown, they were married, and he never told them. He
wasn't on the show.
No.
It was after the Josh stuff broke out. 19 Kids and Counting was canceled.
And then Jill and Jessa.
But then they did the Jill and Jessa part. But he was getting the money from it. $850,000 a season.
And the kids didn't even know he was getting paid.
And he just said, hey, sign this real quick. And they all signed it. Not even thinking twice.
Because they're conditioned to not question authority, to not question their dad.
Watch out for that covering.
Oh, like such a setup for narcissistic people to just ruin.
Okay, I did want to mention this part, and I think it's perfect that we actually mention this. Where is it? Gothard turned every father into a cult leader and every family into an island.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think it's really interesting, especially when you watch like shows like 19 Kids and Counting, that it shows that they are their island and it shows them going out in public and stuff, but they're not like super integrated, right? Like very little integration. But then you have families like the Duggars and the Bates where they'll like commingle because they have the same ideas.
Yeah.
And then they go back to their separate places and then they all the islands essentially, families come together at like that camp in like Big Sandy, Texas, and it like IBLP headquarters, and like they have these places where they get together, and that's as close to like mingling as you get.
Yeah. Okay, on the child abuse thing, really quick, the 2 notes that I just wanted to point out when we were talking about the blanket training and stuff. There was a guy who was doing a conference, he was speaking at an IBLP conference. He was an older, Ligon was his last name, I think, or something like that. Whatever. I just remember his name because of the things he did after that. I was like, holy moly.
Yeah.
He brought up a little kid. And
he said if there's he's like, well, if I had a little boy right now,
I'd show you how to
spank.
Yeah. They literally brought a little child
So
up.
this parent went, here.
Right? Like, abuse my kid.
Probably like 7. Yeah.
In front of this crowd of people and just humiliate him and abuse. Sure, do that. So literally this little kid went up to this guy. This guy acts like he's his father, right? Like, sits down, puts this boy in front of him and says, now you know that daddy's really disappointed in you and daddy doesn't like what you did. And like, daddy isn't happy about, I'm like, oh my God. And then
like belittling.
Yes.
And then lays the kid over his lap
and
pretends to spank him over again on his butt with his hand, which I'm like,
which
this
is
is
creepy.
Inappropriate.
Like he was just sitting there patting the kid's butt. It was
like,
so weird.
This is so inappropriate. And then he like brings the kid back up and then he's like, something about, you know that daddy loves you, whatever, give daddy a hug. Right. Like that's literally what they do with the women, having them have sex after the husband beats them. It's literally conditioning them that like, this is what love looks like. This is love, right?
That's how I was when I got spankings. It was give me a hug. We do this because we love you. We want you to turn out okay.
That's one. I was taught
like,
that too, but I wasn't made to give my parents a hug. I wasn't forced to do that. This little kid doesn't really give this guy a like
he's a stranger.
Full-on hug. He's a stranger. Why would this kid hug you like you're his parent? You're not his parent, and you just humiliated him in front of him. You used him as like an example in front of people. He's for sure not going to feel safe. And then this man says, oh, that wasn't a full-on hug. You didn't hug daddy very well. We're going to spank you again. He literally spanked that little boy again. Well, like didn't actually spank him, but just
he was modeling what you should
modeling
do.
what
your
you
kid
should do.
Doesn't hug you in a way that's acceptable.
Yeah,
then you spank him again.
Yeah, and then the boy gave him the hug he wanted. It was never about
kids want or need.
Yes, it is all about the parents, what they want, what they need, and what they want and need. Yeah, and I was just like, you have got. And then this man says that psychological. Did he say abuse?
He did not say abuse.
He said psychological.
He basically
psychological torture.
Yes, it's the word torture. Psychological.
That's an okay word, but abusive.
Yeah, is sometimes better than physical beating. So basically, you leave the child thinking that you're going to spank them, but you just wait and draw it out as long as you can until you actually spank them.
So spank. Long pause and sit there for a while. So they think you're done, but they can't get up
because they were wailing too hard.
Yeah.
So let them get it together and go in their mind in fear,
and then
do it again. And I think it was really interesting. They asked cousin Amy, like, did you ever see your cousins get spanked with a rod? And she goes, I saw them get encouragement. So the Duggars never said it. She goes, and they said it in the sweetest way too. Do you need encouragement? I think you're gonna get some encouragement. And so the threat of spanking or physical abuse is encouragement, because I'm 99.999% sure there is not anywhere where that is I'm being sarcastic with that percentage, but like that is not ever in a definition of encouragement anywhere.
No,
encouragement is to build you up and bring you higher and call you into
who you are.
Yeah,
not who somebody wants to make
not
you
to
be.
break you down, break your will, and make you submit.
Yeah. It was gross.
You want to throw up?
Freaking gross. What else do we have here? I just want to hit on some things that we thought were just interesting things that will be kind of quick things. We still have so many notes here. So one thing that they talked about there is going off to a camp there, and they would let them go to the grocery store once a week. So that we said once every 2 weeks to get supplies they needed, toiletries, things like that. They got to go to Walmart. And I love this part. This girl talked about how she bought tampons because she needed them. And they always went through your things when they got back from the store, and they took, she said they took my devil sticks.
She goes, they took my tampons. She goes, fine, I'll get rid of my devil sticks.
So because it was inappropriate for her to have tampons, it might possibly cause her pleasure.
And she goes, they're worried about it breaking my hymen, so they're gonna take them.
Because that's only my husband can do that. Oh my God.
Insane. They talked about how honor, respect, and obey were all on the same level. Basically, they all meant the same thing, which we've talked about this. If you haven't heard our honor episode, go check that out. Also, check out our episode where we talked about Ginger, Duggar, how do you say
Our
his
other
name?
bonus,
Yes.
Volo.
Well, how do you say it? The other Duggar
Her
girl.
book, Becoming
Yes.
Free Indeed. It's our other bonus episode that we've got.
So
Yeah.
check that one out because we
gives
talk
some
about some
more.
same stuff as well
Yeah.
in there, probably some more context even. And there was some things about a military in there. We're talking about what is a cult. Bill Gothard was building his own military. When someone's building their own military, like they're preparing for a war.
Mm.
And we're
get
not
into that.
Yes, and we're not like. Here's the thing. I don't know where this came up in the Christian realm that like we're supposed to be ready to war. We're not.
What do you think
like,
angels are for?
Yeah,
Exactly.
we're not supposed to war
Well, if
anything.
you like war because of your faith, like you're literally going out to fight people about their faith, that is literally in the Constitution. You can't do that.
Yeah.
Like you let people believe whatever the hell they want to believe
Mhm.
and keep your damn
Mhm.
army
Let
to
them make
yourself.
the mind,
Like
yeah.
you have to build an army to advance a faith.
So you know what I thought was really interesting? The way the Duggars actually sold that on 19 Kids and Counting was the boys are going to this summer camp and it builds almost like it builds morale, builds like their physical stamina, builds their like
Knowing how to work and their skill sets. And
yes. And even what's the word? I don't know. Anyway, like they sold it as like this positive thing for these young boys to go and learn essentially like how to be men. But then we're watching video of it last night and it almost made me think of like the Hunger Games where they like that is literally the vibes I was
Yeah.
getting from some of it. It
'Cause
was like the way they were like rushing in and like they're like some of like the training exercises that they were doing, I was like, this feels like Hunger Games.
Yeah.
Like so weird. And they talked about infiltrating with like the military and the government and all these things and talking about how they're slowly like
wanting to take over
getting
the world,
in.
basically.
And they've actually got people in, is he Congress? Representatives?
Mhm.
Which one? Anyway, Madison Hawthorne from North Carolina. He is actually one of
Hawthorne.
Hawthorne? No, close enough.
Yeah.
He's literally somebody that was raised up under this Joshua generation, which is another subsection under IBLP, and how they're starting to get there. And there's even a 21-year-old state representative somewhere, I don't remember what state, but like they're actually getting into office. And what I think is really interesting is like the only thing I ever knew about the Madison dude was I was like, he was literally all over TikTok because he was pretty, and the girls were like, oh my gosh. And it's like that was literally like the biggest thing I saw about him. And now I see this and I'm like, holy moly.
Yeah.
Like this is wild. Like it's interesting to see them like literally using the language infiltrate, which I think there's ways to use language that are ominous, and that's the way they're using it. And then I think there's like, you go and impact and influence,
Right.
not infiltrate, right? Like,
well, you go.
I want to impact culture, and this is what we're doing here. We don't have to go and be like, I'm going to get office. I'm going to, like, I think there's people that are called to government, but I think
it's all the intention.
I think the way they're doing it is so like, it's honestly a little scary.
Yeah.
Watching that, I was like, holy crap. And the fact that they're actually in office now, I'm like, oh my gosh.
It's the intention and heart behind everything. Everything that your intention and heart behind anything you do will bleed through in the words you use. You can use the right words, but people can feel what you are actually wanting to do.
And really, if you look at the whole thing as a whole, you have Gothard who has all these rules. He's not married, doesn't have kids, but
He makes
all these rules about being married and having kids and stuff, right? And then he's building up these generations of people, and his goal basically is to let's break the wives, get the men to follow me because they understand that I'm going to give them power, get them to break their wives, break the kids. Then we're going to train those kids so they can go in and get in government type of positions, so they can begin to break the world of their voices and who they are and of their choices.
And the world doesn't need that. Like the world doesn't need help doing that.
No.
Oh no, they do that.
You know what I mean? Like
we do that.
The world's
really
there.
well.
Yeah.
And so
It's a lot of excess, sir. Like, calm down.
Yes. And so it's so absolutely bizarre.
So one of the things they
Okay.
actually even said was the women and the children are the engine that keep this running.
Mhm.
And that was exactly what it is,
Mhm.
because the women and the children do everything and the men go to meetings and learn how to control. It's
True.
essentially what was happening. Like,
Mhm.
I feel like
Yeah,
that's my opinion.
I mean, the men, when you don't feel like you're powerful yourself, you will look for ways to find power outside of who you are. And that looks like usually control, domination, manipulation, abuse, all of those things, because you don't feel powerful as a person. You don't feel like you're powerful. So you've got to find that somewhere else, because we were made to be powerful.
Right.
But that twisted or that unhealthy side of that is when you don't realize that it's all inside of you. Actually, you don't need to control anybody else to feel powerful yourself. You don't need anybody to be powerful. And this is just a twisted, sick side of that. That's not the truth. There's a few things that Bill Gothard did that I just want to highlight here really quick. He said in girls who disobeyed Bill Gothard, because Bill would select, he had a type. They were like Gothard girls. So they usually were blonde,
They were young,
pretty.
too.
They were super young, underage. They were under 18. He would have a type and he would single them out and he would spend time with them one-on-one. He would tell them that he would want them to go work at corporate or headquarters, and headquarters was the shit. That is where you wanted to work, right? Well, he would get all these young girls to go work, quote unquote, at the headquarters, but then he would touch them, groom them. You would use praying over them as a reason to touch them. And they had rules that men can't touch women, but
6 inches for Jesus.
It's true. But for Bill Gothard, those rules didn't apply. And he raped one girl at one point. She came out and talked about it, right? There was this anyway, but he would take women into his private study and just he would see how far grope them, see how far he could go, but they couldn't say no to him, right? Because they were taught that you can't say
they didn't know how to say no to anything.
You can't form allegations because it's against God. You cannot gossip.
You can't.
It was a whole thing in their contract.
Girls who disobeyed Bill got sent to his brother Steve in a remote headquarter place, wherever they had this camp or whatever that was an IBLP camp. And Bill and Steve was known to assault women. They literally had the law.
He had charges.
He had charges. And Bill, instead of taking him out of things and cutting him off, just sent him somewhere to a different location, which was more remote, which means he doesn't have as many people around to be accountable to. So you can imagine what these women went through that got sent to Steve because they wouldn't obey Bill. Can you imagine? And then the other thing he said was, there was one other thing. Oh, he pulled the girls aside because their hair was not curly enough. There was a certain kind of hairstyle you had to have, and this girl's hair wasn't curly enough naturally. So he was it doesn't have that oomph for Jesus or whatever. And I was
something about I kept curling it to give it more oomph.
Literally, all the things you can do to somebody to dehumanize them, this man did.
And then any of those women that came forward and said that they were assaulted, they were then asked, what did you do to deserve that? If they decided to believe them, they said, what did you do to deserve that?
They actually had sessions where they had to sit down and all talk about what they did to deserve what they got.
They had this meeting, these girls and boys camps or whatever. I guess it was at camp, right?
I have no idea.
But somewhere where the women would get together and they would talk about who all was assaulted. First of all, you're reliving trauma. And then they were like,
well, what trauma bonding?
Yeah. What did you do to deserve that? So you're telling me that somebody's choices is my problem. This is how we keep this is how we keep people feeding off of other people and keep perpetuating abuse, because we just make it the victim. It's victim shaming or victim blaming, whatever you want to call that. The words in my vocabulary, I don't feel are spicy enough
I know
to adequately portray what I'm feeling right now. There is so much
it's disgusting.
It's disgusting.
And that's there's literally so much of it. I mean, we've only touched on a few of the things. We've got a few notes. I don't know if you guys want to hit on more, but there's so much to it. And for me, seeing so much of the discipline concepts, the covering concepts, and then especially the way they talked about they talked about men's eyes in there, and
the shorter the skirt, the more vicious the trap.
Yes, it says that about women, and the problem is that with men they have a problem with their eyes, which even in that I'm like, first, Leslie had mentioned, she's like, at least they mentioned the men's eyes.
Even had somebody talk about like the men's eyes having a problem or a man having a problem. We were the problem that they were encountering. Well, so it wasn't ever a man's problem. So I was like, I'm actually like slightly shocked by that. Like I wasn't,
but at the same time, when I heard it, and the whole quote is, the problem is that the men have a problem with their eyes. The shorter the skirt, the more vicious the trap, was the whole sentence.
Because they were talking about eye traps. Was really what they were talking about.
And my immediate thought is, so now every teenage boy, man, whatever goes, there's a problem with my eyes. My eyes are wrong. There's nothing wrong with the fact that a man looks at a woman and thinks they're attractive. I look at women, I'm like, dang, she looks good. I'm like, but fine. Like,
I'm no better than a man sometimes, like, honestly. And it's like, to be honest, it's sometimes women are really pretty and beautiful. And like, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I think when so we're men, there's some really nice men out there. Jesus did good on some of this. He did good on all of people, everybody.
But some he just put some extra
put
it.
Yeah.
A little extra spice.
Anyway,
cinnamon, some sugar there,
right?
But as a whole, I'm like, I feel like that was just a massive piece of it, because we pretty much all, if you don't know Josh Duggar's story and all that, do a quick Google search of his name and you'll figure it all out. But that stuff is so rampant in every single tight, what looks like pretty clean religion.
And it's like,
because
victimizing the men too. Like, you're instantly a victim of yourself.
Yes.
You don't have any power. You're powerless.
Yeah. Check out our episodes where we had Bethy's cousin Matt on here, because he talked about that specifically. He was raised Mennonite, and so he talks about how it takes the power and control of your own self away as a man. And it's so intriguing to me. I was trying to like have a conversation with my husband about it last night and just asking him questions. I was like, so what do you think? Like, as a teenage boy, what did you think when you saw?
Because he wasn't raised in any of this.
Yeah, he was not raised in any of this, right? He was the occasional churchgoer. And he's like, I look at a girl and go, dang, she looks good. She has a nice butt. But then my brain would go to whatever else I was talking about with my friends. I wasn't there envisioning myself having sex with her.
I think the church over-sexualizes some things, and I think it's like old. They teach you a few perverted, like a handful of very perverted men, generally men. I'm not making, like, I'm not saying it's all men, but like I think there's a handful of them that have over-sexualized things, and now that's the lingo. That's the narrative of like everything is over-sexualized, everything's about sex, and
I think it's over-sexualized.
Can we like stop?
Yes.
Why is the church so over-sexualized? The world's actually not.
No, it's not.
The world is empowering, but then the church is over-sexualized.
Then the church says that the world is like over-sexualized. I'm like,
no, prophesying it, right? Didn't we have this conversation?
Well, we did. Well, I don't think they do. I think they just like, for me personally, I was in like the bodybuilding world. I've been in bodybuilding competition. So like I did a sport where I was in a bikini, right? And my body was being looked at. And I saw how much honor and respect there was for the human body and the fact that it being a beautiful thing, right? And just the way that someone can look at their newborn baby and go, oh, the baby's beautiful. And they're not thinking sexual things about the baby, right? They're like, look at their toes, look at their cute little thighs, like all that, right? They're just looking at how beautiful their body is. I think the world has actually done a really good job of that in general. And the church has been like, oh, they're sexualizing it. No, they're not.
Look, and I think the church is speaking that out, and they're literally prophesying over the world of like, oh, it's over-sexualized, it's over-sexualized, it's over-sexualized. And so then it's almost like that's the way the church is geared to see the world. But also like you're not looking at the church and the world vastly differently, right? You look at them like they're going to hell and that you're saved. Like I get, which whatever. Anyway, that's a whole other conversation. But like, other than that, like you're not changing glasses every time you look at people. You're looking at people as a whole.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if people are going to church or not whenever I see them out at the grocery store.
Exactly.
Or the gym or the wherever, you know?
Yeah. I think that the whole root of this personally is that the church is scared shitless of intimacy. They don't know how to have intimacy
100%
with Jesus, with the Trinity. They don't know how to have relationship. So out of that comes this, like anything that fosters or feeds or builds intimacy, they are scared of. And they because of that, sex is considered taboo. You don't talk about it because we're uncomfortable with intimacy. So we can't even talk about the things that foster that, right? So that's a taboo thing. That's a shameful thing, because we think that because it's a root of like intimacy is at the root. You do not feel comfortable with it because I don't think you can be, you don't know how to like know yourself first before you know anybody else. It comes down to a personal thing, right? In the church. But then it's like, you can't be like, get to know yourself on an intimate level, right? Like personally.
Let's like kind of like intimacy. We're not talking about sex.
No,
Intimacy.
no.
We're talking
Sex
about
is a facet of intimacy, not the other way
when
around.
you
Right.
see a couple that is like has a deep connection, they know each other. You
Right.
can tell they trust each other. We said this even about you. Look at Josh and Anna and how awkward they are together.
Yes.
And then you watch Jill and Derek and the way when they're talking inside of this documentary, and she has this moment where she's like too choked up and there's too
And
much
she just
pain.
goes,
Yeah, she throws her hand over towards her husband, and his spirit knows my wife needs me. I got her right now.
Well,
And that's
it's
intimacy.
amazing.
And
That's intimacy.
intimacy literally means into me you see. Do you allow yourself to see into yourself? Like
A lot of people don't.
are you able to be
into
vulnerable enough? with yourself?
vulnerable? Yeah, like this is who I am and I love myself, right? A lot of people don't go on that journey of into themselves they see, right?
Right.
So like they can't allow anybody else to see into them and vice versa, right? Like I can have intimacy with my friends, with Leslie and Berlin, like letting them see into who I am, who Bethany actually is, authentic, vulnerable. We don't do that unless we feel safe, right? A lot of people in church are in religion. Religion isn't in every church, right?
Right.
But if you're in religion, intimacy destroys religion because it's vulnerability, it's authenticity, it's where power comes, your power, like being a powerful person and letting people see your power. But we don't feel safe because it's a lot of like, you have to look good and act good and do all the right things because we are just a bunch of people who can't mess up because we've been taught that we have to be perfect, and perfect means you look good all the time. You were born perfect. Nothing you do can make you perfect because you are that before you ever came into the world, right? So like it's all these things, and then sex and sexualization are just a result of these root issues that aren't taken care of, that people aren't healed. They're scared shitless if anybody's seeing them. And so the world, and it's in the church that's way more prevalent. The world isn't like that. The world is way more loving and kind and like you said, accepting, because you experience it in bodybuilding, right? Like the world is way more like into me you see than anybody else, than the church, than religion, right?
Because
like,
religion is taught there's so much shame and things to hide from, and so
because
you isolate.
You're taught that you are bad. You were born a sinner. You were born dirty. You're not going to let anybody see that, right? If you believe that, I don't want anybody to see that because I don't like it, right? So why would I let anybody else see it? And so I think that's at the root of this whole like over-sexualizing things, right? And it comes down to people starting to love themselves, letting themselves get to see themselves and know themselves and genuinely believe you are a good person. You are good. You were born with the DNA of good. That's who we were born to be. You've just been taught the opposite. And out of everything else comes, I think.
Yeah. I think that's like the perfect way to summarize like everything, right? Like this is the piece that's missing that could change everything. And it's not just the extreme places like IBLP that can change, right? It can literally change just this. It can just change in like your heart, your soul, like everything inside. That's the one thing that can change it all. And so I think that's perfect way to wrap that up.
It's well, one other thing that the one girl said that I thought was cool was the quote she said of
the very end. Yeah.
You want to?
Yeah. So at the very end, there was someone there who actually, she was probably in her 50s, would you say? Like her kids were probably grown. She talked about having 5 kids, and she was one that actually, you know, was supposed to call her husband my lord. And at one point her husband followed her around the house for hours with a piece of wood, threatening her and yelling at her. And he said he was leaving for a few minutes, and a voice in her head said, run. And she grabbed the kids and ran. And he came back to the house with a gun. And she kind of summarized this up at the very end. And she said, when you're out there, there are people who will catch you. The universe will catch you. So no matter what where you're at. If you're like, okay, I'm not an IBLP, but I feel like the faith I'm in and that my family's in and that I was raised in, like, it's time for me to go. It's time for me to go find some more freedom. Like I feel like there's a God there that's way better than this and way more gooder than this. Like there are people that will catch you, right? Like that's like we look at Anna Duggar, like she doesn't think anyone will be there to catch her, or she thinks someone has caught her and really they've just brought her back into more bondage, right? And held her there more. But there are so many people that are out there that are like, I've been there. What you need? I'm here to help you. We'll support you. I'll be here through it with you. Because that's what God wants. Like that is what modeling God is. Modeling God is not making sure that you're dressing modest and you're following all these rules and have as many babies as possible. It's seeing someone being like, I got you. I got you. Yeah. That's all he wants.
Loving others the same way that you love yourself. And if you don't love yourself, get to do that first there, like for you. You can't get what you don't have. But that was the greatest commandment he gave us.
Yeah.
Just love. Like, what does love look like? What does love do? And I think sometimes the things we've been taught about love isn't actually love. So like, let's look at our definition of love, right? And like, is it healthy? Is it good? Is it only good? Is it only other, like focusing on the good of that person, right? Like, what do they need? And so anyway.
That's great, guys. So if you haven't seen Shiny Happy People, go watch it. It's a 4-part episode. So it's probably just under 4 hours long, something like that. Yeah. It's very interesting, very intriguing. Maybe you'll go through it and be like, oh shit, I was raised with that teaching. It is. But when you're able to find things in your life that you realize that you believed, you're able to break them off. I've got some things I need to work on after watching it, I realize.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, you guys. So we will see you in the next episode.
Bye.